Региональный директор по связям с общественностью Airbus России Мария Шляхтова.
Очень приятно. Добрый день.
Менеджер по России, Беларуси и Казахстану авиакомпании Etihad Airways Наталья Горюнова.
Здравствуйте.
Директор по продажам авиакомпании Airbaltic Том Сандерсон.
Здравствуйте.
Переходим к нашему первому выступающему, Леонид Мармер. Леонид, компания Amadeus известна солидным техническим опытом, а также авторитетными исследованиями travel рынка. Не так давно вы опубликовали подробный анализ мировых трендов индустрии. Расскажите нам, как изменился подход к путешествиям в период пандемии и чего можно ожидать в ближайшем будущем. Вернется ли спрос по поездкам, когда он вернется, ну и, собственно, чем путешественники готовы поступиться и чему отдают предпочтение при выборе поездки.
Спасибо, Антон. Еще раз приветствую всех участников сегодняшнего эфира. Постараюсь в ближайшие несколько минут рассказать вам об основных трендах, если можно включить презентацию, чтобы у нас была визуальная картинка. Я постараюсь рассказать вам о результатах последних опросов и аналитики, которые провел Amadeus в глобальном масштабе. Мы регулярно публикуем результаты подобных исследований. Я думаю, что будет очень интересно нашим слушателям посмотреть на самые свежие цифры. И кроме этого мы сможем не только дать комментарии, но и обсудить потом в дальнейшей дискуссии. Итак, как выглядела наша индустрия путешествий в прошлом году? Все авиакомпании и по статистике IATA, статистике WTO.
And so according to the statistics of the WTO, we are at a record level of aviation transportation. We had a lot of different products in the travel industry, and new destinations were opened. There were also about $2 billion in terms of sales, and the tourism sector developed very well. And at the beginning of this year, we learned a new word, which is called a pandemic or an epidemic, which is an epidemic, and now it's of a global scale. And I think my colleagues will agree with me. Earlier this year it was very difficult to do an estimate. At first, China got this epidemic, then the focus moved to Europe, and then it got to almost all countries of the world. And right now, it's about 9 or 10 months since the beginning of the pandemic. And furthermore, we can also see some of the trends which we saw throughout this time. So today, we are at a stage where it's difficult to determine whether the second wave has started, whether it's over, but there are several clear aspects that explain the current situation from the point of view of consumer demand and from what's happening everywhere. So we had some tourism recovery this summer and aviation recovery in some countries, and the transportation was first local. The borders were closed, there were very strict limitations, so people first of all traveled across their own country, and sometimes the choice of transport mode was very different. It was not always aviation, sometimes other modes of transportation, and so on. Then there was another trend. Tourism travel recovered much faster than business travel, but there's another factor here. A lot of global companies that have branches in many countries of the world are now facing other issues. So maybe business traveling will not recover in full. Businesses are adapted to a new format because before it was a face-to-face meeting and now there is more online communication. Furthermore, we are used to the younger generation being more active as tourists. Maybe they do not fear as much, but that's also a risk for elderly people. On the whole, globally, pensioners and people of pre-retirement age were a large percentage of tourists, but now this number reduced because of certain limitations. The hospitality industry, the hotel industry, is recovering much faster than aviation or transport. We have to accept that. And tourist preferences at the moment are about safer holidays, and it's not always the cost that is a decisive factor. Tourists want to feel safe. They want to have a vacation without seeing a lot of crowds around. We're also seeing overall trends in the entire industry. This is about traveler trust, which is undermined, and all the market players need to re-establish this trust. I'm talking about airlines, tourist administrations, tour agencies, tour operators. So it's a very general task. We also need to find an agreement on an international level in order to remove certain limitations. You remember that some limitations were introduced in a spontaneous way, and even now some countries seem to be safe, but the borders still seem to be closed. So some of the countries are just plain safe. And we are also going to have a new know-how in the entire industry supported by IATA and ICAO. That means that a lot of standards are currently being developed, setting the overall rules for tourism. As for technologies, there is a big breakthrough now. What was of no particular interest before is now in great demand, and this is the case for airports, railway stations, which introduce a lot of innovations. And many of those innovations will stay with us. We can see some clear-cut trends, and I'm sure that my colleagues will talk about it a bit later. So, regarding the rethinking of the tourism sector in the future, many things which we can see on the slide at the moment are already being introduced. I'm talking about the sanitizing of different things and objects, the introduction of robot-powered services, virtual reality, movement tracking for tourists traveling across countries and cities. Furthermore, I have to say that information is paramount today. Sometimes there is not enough information, and Russian tourists going abroad sometimes faced a situation where they did not have complete information as to what is going to happen at airports and terminals. So we need to think about general protocols and novelties. Amadeus calls on all the marketplace to rethink travel, and I'm talking about travel and not tourism or transport, because travel is a broader notion. Amadeus launched a new press release of a report which is called Destination X. Where to next? Our respondents included several thousands of travelers all over the world. Some of them are Amadeus employees, who played a negative part there, because we all traveled a lot, and we can see the overall picture of the trends we are currently seeing. Now I'm going to move on to the concrete trends. Along with the top 10 global insights that I'm going to talk about, there are some additional ones. Like before, we still want to travel. 71% of travelers say they want to travel immediately or within 1 to 3 months after travel restrictions are lifted. There is no longer any fear on the part of those travelers. We are going to look for a balance between budget nations, and almost each traveler said that package solutions and individual solutions are both relevant, so it is hard to say which one is prevalent. 52% of travelers are looking to travel to reconnect with family, followed by traveling to an unknown destination. COVID-19 is indeed a major obstacle for travel to a certain country, and we could see what happened in Russia. As soon as limitations or restrictions to go to a certain country were removed, there was a flow of tourists going there, and we can see this everywhere. Air is on. Almost 96% of travelers say that they will continue to fly, and we have certain hopes that this industry is going to recover, even though it did suffer the most. Hotels also suffered, but still, the choice of the right hotel, of the right destination, is a very important factor right now. Right now, there are other modes of transportation which compete with aviation. Sometimes people went from airline flights to rail or to their personal cars. And right now we can see a lot of competition with railways. Furthermore, car travel, according to respondents, is safer if they have a possibility to move within their country or to other countries by car. Travel insurance is still important. Travelers said that they are going to insure themselves against COVID-19, among other things. And it is also important that tour agents will continue to play a major role. Here you can see another slide which shows some of the trends that we discussed before. We did a request as to the length of a travel, how much it is going to last, and the respondents said about their preferences, and as a rule they preferred some destinations with direct flights, because just a few months ago we saw a situation where some restrictions were introduced and some people were forgotten or left behind at a certain airport because of that, so we are already fearing that. Travel planning is a critical factor, and we can see a lot of electronic tools or digital applications for that purpose. There is another very interesting trend which regards individual tours compared to group tours. And this trend is very logical, we have to accept that. What is important for our clients? This mostly concerns our today's discussion. Social distancing Of course, it's a factor encouraging people to go to destinations where this issue is settled. So, if there is a possibility for an alternative mode of transportation rather than aviation, they will choose the alternative one. Passengers also prefer direct flights without having to move on to another flight without any connection, because there is also a risk that they will be left behind at the airport because a flight will be cancelled. Our respondents also point out that sanitation measures in public places are very important, for example, at airports or railway stations. As for insurance, I'm sure that Russian insurance companies rethought their business and used a new insurance product such as insurance against COVID-19.
Вопросы не остается время. Да.
We have a question, Leonid. Well, I'm finishing already. Now, I'm moving on to the most important issues. I will just sum everything up within the next 2 or 3 minutes. The first thing, people still want to travel. That's a positive fact. Individual tours are now in greater demand for travelers. International travel will be in great demand as soon as the restrictions between countries are lifted. And 1/4 of respondents still prefer other modes of transportation rather than aviation. Hotel accommodation is a preference for the private sector. I've mentioned insurance. Respondents were quite serious about this. And there is another important aspect. Will travelers move fully online without any tour agencies? Are they going to book everything from hotels or airlines directly? 40% of our respondents are still expecting support from tour agencies. And it is in international trips that a tour operator or a tour agency can help you with your tour. To conclude, we ask all the industry to cooperate, to collaborate, because it is through joint efforts that we can achieve results and be even better after the crisis is over. Thank you. Leonid, I have a question. A lot of research pointed out that there are local markets, such as Russia or China. So local markets are recovering rather fast to the level before the crisis, because we could see this from airport studies, Aeroflot studies. Their indicators are almost recovered. So are we expecting the same fast recovery for international flights? Yes. First of all, there are geopolitical factors, because in one country it is the leadership of a country that takes the decision. It's very rare that one region introduces restrictions and the other region opens some destinations, but it happened in China for some time. I think that the Russian example of opening different international destinations is a great example showing that it is possible. The countries have to agree with one another, and then their flight will be recovered. In April, a lot of countries joined in the so-called enclaves. Then they set up some green corridors, then the so-called travel bubbles. Those bubbles burst after that, because the European Union did not talk with a single voice, and each country had an individual policy. But we could also see some positive examples. For example, Singapore and Hong Kong agreed to organize a green corridor at this moment. So agreements between countries at the highest level are very important. And there's another question: with what frequency will the airline start those flights? Given that there are still a lot of limitations, there are lockdowns, there are some citizenship issues, and this is all about geopolitics.
Еще такой вопрос. Для авиакомпаний, многие
There is
авиакомпании
another
сейчас
question.
говорят, что
A
для
lot
них
of
важно максимально быстро
airlines
восстановить
still say
пассажиропотоки.
that it is important for
Означает
them
ли
to
это,
recover
что
the passenger flows
происходит
as
коррекция тарифной
rapidly
политики,
as
то
possible?
есть, чтобы
Does it
привлечь
mean
больше
that
молодых
there is
путешественников,
now
о которых вы говорили, они где-то снижают
some
тарифы,
change in the tariff
новые
policy
условия,
in
или
order to
они,
attract younger
наоборот, сейчас
population?
стремятся поддержать
They are reducing their
маржинальность
tariffs.
бизнеса, потому что
Or are
понятно, что
airlines try
предыдущие полгода
to
они несли очень
maintain the
серьезные издержки.
marginality of their
И
business,
каким-то
keep the
образом
same margins,
поддержать на
because
нужном
they
уровне
ran
тарифы,
a
которые
lot of
только
costs
приподнимут
before? So
маржу.
do they need to support
Вы
tariffs
знаете,
that
наверное, не
will
открою
improve their
секрет, что
margins?
сегодня многие
You know,
мировые
it's an
авиакомпании
open secret that a lot
в
of
очень
global
тяжелом финансовом
companies
состоянии,
are
потому
in a very
что
difficult
сценарий, по
financial
которому пошла
situation at the
мировая
moment.
индустрия, абсолютно был
Because we can see the
непредсказуемый,
global
и ни в
industry
одной книге, ни в одном
scenario,
учебнике
which was
не было прописано.
unpredicted. You
Поэтому
could see
сегодня, как
this
никогда,
scenario in
авиакомпаниям
no
нужно
book or
соблюдать
textbook.
правильный
So
баланс перед
today it is really important
своими
to find
издержками
the right
и
balance
расходами и маржинальностью и
between
соблюдением
the
такого
costs
определенного
and
баланса
the
между
revenues.
минимальной прибылью, но безубыточным состоянием, потому что уверен,
And it is
что
also
некоторые
very
перевозчики
important to find the
находятся
minimal
в середине
profit,
пути,
but to
будут
break even.
реструктурироваться,
I'm sure
вполне
that
возможно будет
some
слияние, поглощение,
transport
и
companies
некоторые
are going to
авиакомпании
restructure,
просто
maybe
не
there will
доживут до
be
конца
mergers
кризиса.
and
Именно
acquisitions,
потому,
and
что
some
или
airlines
пытаются
will not
демпинговать, или
live or
сыграть
survive
очень
until the end
жестокие
of the
Поэтому
crisis. Some of
баланс
the
это то,
companies are going to
что
use
сегодня очень
dumping,
важно.
so
Мы не
it's
наблюдаем
really
факторов
important
вот
to
очень
find the
сильного
balance
снижения
today.
притяжения туристических потоков или потребителей. Я
We
думаю,
can't
что
see
правильное
any
управление
particular
доходностью
decrease in tourist
абсолютно
flows, so I think
оправданный
it is
фактор на
very
сегодняшний день.
important to manage
Хорошо,
the
Леонид, спасибо.
revenues
Мы
in the
переходим к
right
нашему
way
следующему
today.
докладчику,
Thank you,
Дмитрий Горин,
Leonid. And we are moving on to our
главного
next speaker,
директора
Dmitry
VIP-сервиса,
Gorin, advisor
советник
to the
Федерального
head,
туризма.
Federal Agency for Tourism of Russia, VIP Service Holding
Добрый день,
CEO.
Антон. И я думаю, что
Hello,
действительно, наверное,
Anton.
сегодня нужно задавать друг другу вопросы,
I
потому
think
что
that
то
today it is
количество
important
вопросов,
to ask
которые задают
questions to each other,
наши туристы,
because
мы должны на
the
них отвечать
amount of questions
профессионально,
that our tourists ask
аргументированно, используя в том числе официальную
requires
информацию,
our
которой
professional
очень много,
answers,
и
well
будь то
argumented
Роспотребнадзор,
ones.
который
And
постепенно
if we talk
обновляет
about
эти нынешние
Rospotrebnadzor,
требования, они
the
очень
Russian
серьезно влияют на настроение
agency
потребительские туристов. Я
supporting
согласен с
consumers,
Леонидом, то,
this
что
is very important
туристы
for the mood of
живут
Russian
в том числе
tourists.
ожиданием новой
I agree
информации,
with
и
Leonid
каждый
because
день,
tourists
когда
are expecting new
Казахстан
information,
сообщает о
and
количестве
every
новых
day when
инфицированных
we
людей,
learn
эта
about
новость
the number of
существенно
newly
влияет в том
infected
числе на
people,
потребительские
this
настроения.
news affects consumer moods considerably.
Сейчас карту можно будет подключить слайды, да?
Can you
Да,
switch
я
on the
хотел
map,
бы
please?
начать,
Thank you.
так как туризм фактически всегда
I would like to
привязан к
tell you
карте
that
мира,
tourism
мы сейчас
is always
живем
linked to the
с
world
вами,
map.
коллеги, по двум
Right now,
картам, и первая карта очень
we
важна,
have two
это
maps.
карта
One map
ИАТА,
is very
которая
important.
обновляется в ежедневном
That's
режиме,
the map
и
of
понятно, что
COVID-19
цвет этой карты
infection,
отражает
which
напряженность в авиации,
is
которую
updated every day.
сказал сейчас
And
Amadeus.
we also have the aviation map, which also updates every day. And of course, the greener the card, the map is, the more we have international flights. And we have some countries, such as Turkey, which show a great dynamic after the restrictions were lifted. It's the best example of how we can lift restrictions while making sure that tourism is safe. There is another map, which seems to be more menacing. You can see the colors on this map, but in any case, if we talk about the criteria and forecasts, this map might be even more important for us, colleagues, because borders are opened based on three factors. That's the international aviation communication, which is opened between Russia and 11 other countries. That is the evaluation of the epidemic situation. Over the past 14 days, the number of people infected was not more than 40 people. And based on that, we understand that for now, the prospects for further border opening are very vague, but at any rate, this trend is changing, and fortunately, those 11 countries with which the borders were opened comply with Russia's criteria, and there is also a reciprocity basis, so Russia complies with their criteria. Furthermore, there was a quotation today from Anna Popova, the head of Rospotrebnadzor, the Russian consumer agency, who said that right now there is more safety with respect to COVID-19, and this is very important. My colleagues will talk about this. This is some survey which is proven. This means that to get infected in an airplane, an average passenger needs to fly for 54 hours in the same cabin with an infected person. 97% of infected particles are removed within 6 minutes, and this is also some very important information. Regarding the numbers and the planning, I fully agree here. With the current analysis that you can see on this slide, here you can see where we are. This is some information from the transport cleaning company, and those numbers are confirming the real situation. And this also reflects the lifting of the restrictions. If we look at 2020 compared to 2019, and we talk about just 8 months, so we can see that last year there were 49 million passengers, and this year it's only 34 million passengers, and 37 million passengers used to travel within the last 8 months of the year, and this year it's only 9.5 million passengers. As for the Russian aviation sector, it's not so bad. This year, thanks to the opening of some tourist destinations, 34 million passengers used some inner Russian flights, and these are very good numbers, because even with these numbers, that's minus 50% from the previous year, but we can still see some improvement. And now I would like to move on to our forecast. No, I will actually move one slide backwards. This is a comparison of 2019, 2020 and 2021, the forecast for 2021. In 2019 we have the actual numbers, 2020 is a forecast, while taking into account the opening of borders and internal flights, and the forecast for 2021 is also very important. Last year we had 128 million passengers on the market of Russian aviation transport. That's 12 months, 55 million passengers for international flights, and we also had millions for domestic flights. And we believe that at the end of the year it will be not 128 million passengers but 71 million passengers, and alas, only 12 million people for international flights. The forecast for next year is really very important. I think this confirms the stage-by-stage recovery. This means that in 2021 we are not going back to 2019 figures, but we will still see growth. And today's forecast is that we will have 104 million passengers, including 77 million passengers for domestic flights within Russia, and 27 million passengers for international flights. This says that domestic flights will still grow more rapidly, but as the borders are opening, international travelers will also grow in numbers. And according to a lot of estimates from our colleagues from abroad, this will depend on the opening of the market. Quite recently, our Chinese colleagues updated their forecast, which became more optimistic. Before, China planned a recovery by 2022, but now some Chinese experts say that tourist exchanges will recover by April 2021, given the new opportunities for inbound tourism, such as the electronic visas that are going to be valid, that are going to be introduced. As for the forecast of the Russian market, the changes are happening on a stage-by-stage basis. Statistics are important here, and that's official statistics. After Turkey recovered, this did not result in more infected people. Yes, there were some cases out of 500,000 people who stayed there in August. There are just a few cases of infected people. Everyone was insured and given full medical aid. As for quotas, there are positive things. There is still the Interagency Commission which resumed functioning, and recently we got updated information saying that our aviation authorities are getting ready to open borders on a stage-by-stage basis. The Ministry of Transportation is having negotiations with dozens of countries. 11 countries have opened borders with us, but this is not a guarantee that the flights will continue or recover. This means that there is a possibility to plan for future travel. And it's good that last year we saw Rosaviatsia's new order. We could see that some destinations are now being opened, such as Cuba, even though the frequency is very low, 2 flights per week, but this is going to change gradually. Starting from the 21st of September, there was a cancellation of some flights, and given that some borders did open, we are going to have colleagues from international airlines today. So this means that we are going to have some transit flights. And the important point is that opening up at this difficult period, when the numbers hit the ceiling and hit the records, means that we are still not safe, but the borders are opening up. We also hope that quotas will be cancelled, and tourist companies are expecting that. As for the international segment, this should be about the safety of countries. And you could see that there is still a lot of red color on the map of freshly infected people, so I hope it will be improved, and there are some more countries with which we are with which we are ready to open our borders. We can see the example of Cuba or Greece. Right now, it's not finished, but it's also an option for another tourist corridor. So my main point is that we are going to have open borders with more countries. There will also be subsidies, without which it will be very difficult to survive. Some companies have considerable losses, up to 450 million. And we know that the tourist sector is also running huge losses, and that's considerable numbers. But at any rate, the first thing with which this year started is the problem with the aviation flights, which were cancelled. In my opinion, tour agents got all their passengers back by the 31st of March, and this also shows that there is trust to tourist agencies, because it was those tourist agencies which were the first ones to provide help to tourists. Some airlines got another subsidy, that is 23 billion rubles. That's not enough money, but the most important subsidy for a company is just the opportunity to keep working, to offer tourist services and products. On a positive note, we know that right now there is the issue of subsidizing domestic flights that is being discussed, up to 15,000 rubles for a lengthy flight. Of course, we are proposing initiatives to support the tourist industry, the aviation market, and we work hand in hand with aviation companies who are our colleagues. Some measures were taken that saved the tourist industry, and as the borders opened up, we can now see that some airlines are resolving the problems of their tourists, even though there is a 4-month delay with sending tourists abroad. Some measures really helped. We had a dialogue with the Ministry of Finance of Russia, and of course there is a complex issue there which could still help. The program for subsidizing domestic flights is also important. More money is earmarked for that purpose, and this is becoming more important. There is another crucial point with respect to support measures. That's the cashback program for package tours, where our tourists can get a discount of 20%, including the flight. This is also a great opportunity for the tourist sector. As for the development of regional hubs, anyway, there are support measures that are connected with flights via the Moscow aviation hub. So this also the opening of international airports is another measure which is paramount in Russia, and we do hope that there will be a longer list of functioning and opened international airports. Looking at the pricing and policy situation at airlines, right now we can see that most companies sell a lot of tickets, starting from 500 rubles, and this confirms that airlines are in a very tough situation because they have to make up for their losses. Some hybrid flights are being developed, that's the low-cost flights and the normal flights, and any Russian airline has this possibility for some low-cost tariffs, but there is still trust in airlines if passengers have the possibility of cancelling their flights. Sometimes we talk about duties of 500 to 1,000 rubles in order to be able to cancel the tickets without fines. As for charter flights, the tourist traffic is not very high, which means that all tourist companies still need to make sure that their airlines, that their aircraft is still functioning. Some quotas were also introduced to destinations such as Minsk or United Arab Emirates, and another destination will probably be added. As a result, airlines will be able to deliver tourist programs without any restrictions. That's
Да,
all I wanted to say, so
первый
are there any
вопрос
questions, Anton?
по поводу расширения
Yes.
полетных программ в уже
The first
открытые
question
направления.
concerns
То есть, как мы
the
знаем, Турция
broadening
сначала
of
была открыта только из Москвы,
tourist
потом
programs.
добавились
Is
полетные
it for
программы
open destinations
и, собственно,
before
открылись маршруты
Turkey
других
was
городов.
opened from
Как
Moscow
происходит,
and then
какой
Turkey was
механизм принятия этих
opened
решений?
from
Это
other
делается на уровне
cities?
Оперштаба
So
или
what's
это
the
уже решает
mechanisms for
Росавиация,
those
основываясь на
solutions? Is it
каких-то
decided
показаниях
by
загрузки рейсов
Rosaviatsia,
и
the
востребованности?
Federal Agency for Aviation, or some other agencies? Yes, this is done actually by the General Headquarters for infection monitoring, and we do provide the data for them to make those decisions, and we take into account the fact that some changes do happen in some countries. We are still in certain discussions. So why is Turkey opened? That's because 75 flights went to the airport at Antalya. And the most popular destination, or destination number one globally, was the route from Moscow to Antalya. That was the most popular international destination. That never happened before. And we had a lot of growth for Russian domestic destinations, where the growth was about 20 to 40%. So talking about quotas, anyway, those quotas are changing gradually. Now we have 3 flights to some countries. As for United Arab Emirates, we are expecting more flights to Dubai. As for Maldives, we moved on to 4 flights from 3 flights very quickly, and last year Aeroflot did 7 flights per week. Those quotas are going to change, I think, but my personal opinion is that we have great potential for Latin American countries, such as Mexico, if the situation is stable there. As we take a decision, the most important thing is that as soon as people return to Russia, they need to take PCR tests, which is a guarantee that the COVID infection will not spread. The fact that operators help passengers do those tests is also a good thing. I also paid attention to one of your slides regarding the recovery of international flights to Russia in 2021. So the rates are much slower. Is it a pessimistic scenario in the event that the opening of borders will be much more slow, or are there any other restraining factors? Well, actually it's only a forecast, and it is based on a pessimistic stage-by-stage scenario for international flight recovery. This summer, we had 3 forecasts regarding different possibilities or scenarios. Right now, we are following the middle scenario, because some experts never expected that Turkey would be opened before October. And actually, Turkey accepted 1.5 million tourists. So this is fascinating. And the season will probably continue until December. One restraining factor in my opinion, is that there are new safety protocols, and according to them, we need to make sure what the number will be on the first day of each month. As for Europe, we can talk about European Union criteria, and those criteria are when there are no more than 25 people infected per
По-моему, даже в Европе очень
100,000
далековаты эти
people.
цифры.
So even Europe is very far from this number right now. That's right. I think we need to look at the European numbers because they are very serious. So everything is going to depend on how the situation develops. But anyway, some immunity to this disease is being developed. Right now, thousands of vaccines are already tested, and vaccination is also an important stage. If vaccination is successful and fast, then the numbers will recover faster. But my personal forecast is that recovery will start in
Хорошо, Дмитрий,
April
спасибо. Переходим к
2021.
нашему следующему
Thank you,
выступающему, Мария
Dmitry.
Шляхтова,
And now we move on to
региональный
our
директор по пиару
next
Airbus Россия.
speaker,
Мария, вам
Maria
слово.
Shlachtova, Regional
Да,
Director
Антон,
of Public
спасибо.
Relations,
Мне
Airbus
досталась такая
Russia.
непростая
Thank you,
тема,
Anton.
тема, связанная
Actually,
с
my topic is
безопасностью
very
в
complex.
самолете, да,
It
насколько
concerns
безопасность перевозок в
aircraft
контексте пандемии.
safety,
Я так понимаю,
whether we
достаточно
do have safety
актуальная,
of
насущная тема, учитывая, что
aviation
наши
transport
участники плюс
during the
слушатели
pandemic.
часто летают, особенно в
Given that
текущий
our
период, и наверняка многих
listeners
волнует вопрос,
fly
насколько
a
безопасно
lot,
находиться в
many
самолете.
are
Все
concerned
мы
about whether
понимаем,
it's
что
safe to
самолет
be
это
on
некое
board.
закрытое
We
пространство,
all understand
особенно
that an
волнует
airplane
вопрос, когда
is
ты
a
летишь в этом
closed
закрытом
space,
пространстве с
and this
людьми,
is
которых
particularly
ты не знаешь.
concerning when
Поэтому
you
моя задача сегодня, наверное,
travel
развеять
together with
некоторые
people you don't
мифы,
know.
возможно,
So my
неправильные
task today
интерпретации, которые
is, among other
зачастую я лично
things,
слышу от
to
коллег
dispel
по
certain
цеху,
myths that
иногда
I
проскальзывают
sometimes hear
подобные
from
публикации в
colleagues.
СМИ. И на самом
There
деле
are some
рассказать, что же происходит на борту самолета, почему на борту
incorrect
самолета
publications in the
безопасно,
media. So I would
даже
like to
в
explain to
контексте
you
пандемии.
why it is safe
Хотела предупредить,
on board a
что будет у меня
plane,
несколько
even
таких
amid a pandemic.
технических слайдов.
I would
Ну,
like
без
to let
этого
you know that
никуда,
I'm
сами
going to have
понимаете,
some
самолет
technical
достаточно носит
slides,
сложную
but I can't do
организацию,
without them
но постараюсь
because
простыми словами
aircraft
объяснить сложные вещи,
are
надеюсь, у меня
complex
получится.
machines, but
Но
I
прежде чем
will
мы начнем,
try to use
хотела бы
simple
сделать
words
такую
to explain
небольшую
those things. I
ремарку,
hope I
подчеркнуть тот
will
факт,
be able
что
to do this.
еще до
But before we
пандемии, да, то есть
start,
это мы не будем
I
говорить
would
про
like
те
to
изменения,
note
которые
that
были
even before the
внедрены во время
pandemic, and we
эпидемии.
are not going to
То
talk
есть, в
about the
принципе,
changes
самолет
introduced
изначально,
during the
любой
pandemic.
современный самолет,
So even before the pandemic,
Airbus, Boeing,
any
он изначально
modern
спроектирован
aircraft,
так,
such as
чтобы
Airbus or
обеспечить не
Boeing,
только максимальный комфорт для здоровья
is
пассажиров,
designed to
но и
ensure
также
full
обеспечить
comfort for
подачу
passengers,
чистого
but
воздуха на
also
протяжении
to
всего полета,
ensure
потому что
pure
прежде
air
всего
during the
безопасность на
entire flight,
борту в эпоху инфекции
because
это так или иначе связано с тем
flight safety
воздухом, которым
in
мы
the era
дышим
of
на протяжении полета.
the
Сейчас я
pandemic
переключу
is
слайд,
linked
чтобы у меня
to the purity of air that we
прежде
breathe.
чем мы
Next
начнем
slide,
говорить,
please.
наверное, всех волнует
Before
вопрос,
we
чем же мы
start talking
дышим,
about it,
находясь в салоне
everyone is probably
самолета и
concerned
совершая перелет, скажем,
about
из
what
Москвы
we
в Сочи,
breathe
да?
when we
Дышим
go,
мы
say, from
смесью.
Moscow to
Смесь
Sochi.
представляет собой
And we breathe within
свежий
mix,
воздух и рециркулируемый
such as
воздух салона,
fresh
то есть
air
примерно,
and
который смешивается в
recirculated
пропорции 50/50. Такой
air
усредненный
from the
показатель, он
cabin
зависит от
in a
разной
50 to
модели,
50
от разного типа.
proportion,
Ну, мы
which
берем некие
depends on
средние цифры.
different types of
Что же
aircrafts
такое
and
свежий
different
воздух?
models,
Да, свежий
but we
воздух
take the
это воздух,
average
который
numbers.
поступает извне.
So
Как мы
what
видим,
is fresh air? This is
примерно
air
на высоте 10
which comes from
километров
the
от влажной степени
outside,
1%, нам вообще
about
сложно
the
представить,
height of
что
10
там могут
kilometers,
быть какие-то бактерии. Да,
and
но
the
если даже
temperature
там
is
есть
less than
какая-то
1%, so
бактерия,
it's difficult to
бактерия или
imagine that
вирус,
there are any
так как воздух
bacteria
поступает в
or
самолет
viruses
от
there.
компрессора
But even
двигателя,
if there
где
is some,
температура
the
достигает
engine
200-250
goes,
градусов, но в принципе,
the
да,
air
в этой
goes on
ситуации
board
ни у одной бактерии
after
нет
passing
шанса.
through
То
the
есть
engine
априори
where
тот
the
воздух,
temperature is
который
very high.
поступает извне,
So the
он уже
air
чистый.
which comes from the
Поступив в
outside
самолет, он
is really
проходит
clean
через
and
систему
pure.
фильтрации, ионизации,
After that, the
дальше
air
он
goes through a
охлаждается в
system of
холодильнике.
filtration and
После
ionization,
чего
and then it
он
is
отправляется в
kept
смеситель.
in
где
turbo
уже
fridges.
смешивается с воздухом
After
в
that, the
салоне. Вот
air
эти оставшиеся
goes
50% это так называемый
to
рециркулируемый
get
воздух
mixed
салона,
with
который
the
также
cabin
постоянно
air.
проходит через систему
And this
фильтрации и
recirculated
очистки.
cabin air
В
also
основе
goes through the
вот
filtration
очистки
and cleaning
воздуха
system.
лежат HEPA-фильтры. На следующем
So
слайде
we
немного более подробно поговорим о том, как они устроены и как работают, и почему их
HEPA
считают самым эффективным средством очистки
for
воздуха на
this
сегодняшний
cleaning,
день.
and those HEPA filters are considered to be the
Соответственно,
most
происходит
efficient
смешение
means of
свежего
air
воздуха,
purification
смесителей и
today.
вот этого
And the fresh air
рециркулируемого, и
and the
после
recirculated
этого
air
данный
are
воздух
mixed,
поступает в
and
салон
after
самолета.
that this air goes to
Как я
the
уже сказала,
airplane
HEPA-фильтры —
cabin.
это самая
As I
эффективная
already
система
said,
очистки
HEPA
воздуха.
filters
Порядка
are the most
99,9%
effective
всех
system
частиц
for
фильтруется, включая
cleaning
бактерии и
the air.
вирусы.
About
И интересно, ВАЗ
99.97%
делал
of the air
научное
is
исследование, но это
filtered,
еще было
and
до ковида,
Airbus
специально
did a
проводили
scientific
испытательные
research
полеты
even
и
before
измеряли
COVID.
качество
There were
воздуха
test
на борту
flights, and
самолета
air
до
quality
полета
was
и
measured
после
on board
полета.
the
Удивитесь,
on board
что
the plane
воздух
before the
после
flight and
полета
after
был
the
гораздо
flight.
более
And
чистым,
surprisingly,
чем до,
the
поэтому
air
сейчас, например, мы
after the
даем
flight was
авиакомпаниям
much
рекомендации
purer and
включать
cleaner
систему
than the air
кондиционирования
before the
еще до
flight.
того, как
And
пассажирам,
now we
например,
recommend
начинается
airlines to
посадка на
switch
рейс,
on
да,
air
чтобы таким
conditioning
образом
system
проводить
even
очистку
before
воздуха заранее.
passengers get on
Еще,
board,
наверное, один
so
вопрос,
that
который
the
волнует
air
многих,
becomes
особенно когда
clean
мы летим
in
далеко,
advance.
дышим
Other
ли мы
people are
одним и тем же
concerned by
воздухом на
another
протяжении
thing.
всего полета.
If
Вот. Но
we
здесь все
fly
очень
a long
просто.
distance, do we breathe the
Воздух в
same
салоне
air
самолета
during the entire
современного
flight?
обновляется примерно каждые 2-3 минуты. То есть каждые 2-3 минуты, благодаря вот этой системе
And this
кондиционирования,
is
очистки
pretty
воздуха,
simple because
воздух в
air
салоне
on board a
полностью
plane
замещается. Ну, вот
is
для
refreshed
сравнения, да, если
every 2 or
представить,
3 minutes, so it's
возьмем
replaced.
какой-нибудь бизнес-центр,
Let's talk
кондиционируемый,
about a
да, вы
business
закрыли
center
окна,
for
находимся в
comparison.
кондиционированном
It's
помещении, там, не
a
знаю, условно,
conditioned
Москва-Сити, да, то там
room,
замещение воздуха
let's
в среднем
say
происходит
the
каждые
Moscow
20
City
минут. То есть, в
business
принципе,
center,
находясь на
air
высоте,
is
как бы это парадоксально, да,
replaced
не
there every
звучало для
20
нас,
to
находясь
30
на высоте,
minutes.
да, 10
So
километров,
paradoxically,
но пассажир
when we
дышит
are at a
гораздо
height of
более
10
чистым воздухом
kilometers,
и
a
свежим
passenger
воздухом, чем
breathes
сотрудник,
much
например, офисного
fresher
современного
and
центра.
purer air than
HEPA-фильтры,
an employee
да,
at a
про них
business
уже много
center.
было сказано.
HEPA
В
filters.
принципе, это не что-то
A lot of
новое, оно
things were
существовало
mentioned
на
about them.
самолетах,
It's not a
существует
new
на
thing.
самолетах очень долгое время.
HEPA
Меняются
filters
модели, так как
function
по
on
мере развития
airplanes for a long
технологий.
time.
Как я уже сказала, действительно самое
Technologies develop, as I said,
средство по очистке воздуха работает
the
как
most
на уровне
efficient means of
микрочастиц,
air
так и
cleaning
на уровне
works
наночастиц.
at the level of
На
micro
слайде
and
приведено сравнение
nanoparticles. And
размера
here
разных
on this
частиц,
slide,
включая
you can
частицы
compare
коронавируса, которые
different
относятся как
particles,
раз-таки
including
к
the
наночастицам.
coronavirus
Собственно,
particles,
при
which are
работе с этими
nanoparticles.
частицами
And
HEPA-фильтры показали
as
свою
the filters work with
стопроцентную
those
эффективность.
particles, they are
И более
100%
того,
efficient.
эксперты
Moreover,
НАСА делали испытания,
NASA
проверяли работу
experts
HEPA-фильтров на
that
космической
tested
станции,
HEPA
и
filters at a
также
space
пришли к выводу, что
station
действительно
also came to a
эти фильтры
conclusion
очень хорошо
that
очищают
those
воздух. Все
filters
мы понимаем, что, да, что в
clean the
космосе
air
чистый
very
воздух, он
well.
очень важен.
We all
И
understand
подтверждением
that
моих слов служит
clean
также
air
тот факт,
is
что именно
very important
HEPA-фильтры,
in the outer
они
space.
используются в
And
операционных.
it's the
Мы
HEPA
знаем, что
filters that are being used
именно
in
в таких
surgery
этих местах
rooms.
вопрос как бы вообще
We
стерильного, да,
all
чистого
know
воздуха,
that
он играет первостепенное также
sterile,
значение.
pure air is paramount in those
Сейчас,
surgery
минуточку,
rooms.
следующий слайд. У меня просто телефон периодически
The next slide,
блокируется.
please.
Следующий слайд не менее интересен, потому как
This slide is also
помимо
interesting
чистого воздуха, да, важную
because
роль в
along with
обеспечении
fresh air,
комфортного и безопасного нахождения пассажиров на борту также играет система распределения воздуха.
there's also
Сейчас
the air
объясню, почему
distribution
это
system,
важно.
which also
Здесь
plays
на
an important
слайде
part in the
представлено
process.
как раз сечение
Why
салона
it's so
самолета.
important?
И
This
голубыми
slide
стрелками
shows
обозначено
how
то, как воздух
this
поступает
air
в салон,
distribution
как он
system is
распределяется по
functioning,
салону.
how the air
Очень
gets
важно, что
into the
воздух
cabin,
в салоне
how it is
распределяется всегда
distributed
сверху вниз
in the cabin.
и всегда
It is
только в
important that
поперечном
the air is
направлении. То
always
есть воздух
distributed
не
from top to
в
bottom,
пределах одного блока кресел.
and
Он не перемещается в продольном
it
направлении,
does
как
not
многие могут
move
думать, да, условно, там,
from
от
some
начала
armchairs to
самолета
other
до хвоста
armchairs.
самолета. Нет. он как
some
раз-таки
from front seats to
заключается
back
в пределах
seats.
одного блока
The
кресел, и
air
вот этими голубыми стрелочками показано,
is
как
only transported
воздух
or is
циркулирует по
only
салону,
moving
и
within the
далее в
same row of
полу
seats.
находится специальное
You can see
отверстие,
these
куда
arrows that
из
show
которых
how the air
выводится уже
circulates
использованный
along
воздух, часть из
the
которого
airplane
покидает
cabin,
самолет через
and then
определенные
the
клапаны,
air
часть как
gets
раз
out
опять
of the
идет по
cabin
новой в
through
систему
certain
фильтрации
valves.
с
Some
HEPA-фильтрами
of
и
the
снова
air
поступает в салон.
goes once
Ну,
again
почему
through
вообще
the
важна
recycling
такая система распределения
cycle.
воздуха? Ну, во-первых,
Why
ну,
is this air
элементарно
distribution system
позволяет избежать
important?
сквозняков, да, наверное, не очень приятно,
Well,
когда
of
тебе
course,
идет
it
сильный
helps
поток
us
воздуха в лицо на протяжении
to
всего полета. Ну
avoid
и второй
some
момент, конечно
wind
же,
blowing
такая
in your
система
face
позволяет
during the
избежать
entire
распространения
flight.
патогенной
But
флоры
this system also
непосредственно по
helps
всему
us
салону.
avoid
Из
the
интересного
distribution
также нужно
of
понимать пассажиру, что, мне кажется,
some
это очень важно, что
infected particles across the
воздух из
entire
туалетных комнат
cabin.
и
It is
воздух,
also
например,
important
из
that the
кухонь,
air coming out
у
from
него там
toilet
своя
rooms
совсем
and from
другая система
kitchen
циркуляции. Этот
rooms
воздух
has a
никогда не
very
поступает в
different
салон,
system of
он никогда не
circulation. This
поступает в
air
эту циркуляцию,
never
он сразу
gets
же
to the
выводится
cabin.
за пределы
It
самолета. И,
gets
кстати,
out
вот у
of
пилотов у них
the
тоже
airplane
отдельная
immediately.
подача
And the
воздуха
pilots
идет в
also
кабину,
have a
также
separate
независимо
air distribution
от
system and air
пассажиров.
supply
И я
system,
хотела
which is
бы
independent
показать
from
небольшое
the
видео,
passenger
такую анимацию мы
system. And I
приготовили
would
о
like to
том,
show you a
собственно, то,
small
что слайды,
video
это, конечно, здорово, да, но вот такой небольшой анимированный
confirming
сюжет о том,
that,
как
because
устроена
slides might
система
be quite
кондиционирования
visual,
и
but
как
there is a
распределяется
small
воздух по
video
салону.
which
Можно,
shows
пожалуйста, включить
how
видео?
this system
Да, то есть,
distributes
как мы
the
видим,
air.
свежий воздух поступает в
As we can
холодильники,
see, fresh air
охлаждается,
goes to the fridges
а дальше
where
идет
it is
смеситель,
cold,
куда
and
уже
then the air
отправился у нас
goes
воздух
to
из
the
салона,
mixers, and it
который
mixes there with
отфильтровался
the air from
HEPA-фильтрами.
the cabin, which was filtered
Происходит
by the HEPA
смешение воздуха,
filters. As a result, there is a
доведение его
mixture
до
of
нужной
the air.
температуры, и дальше мы
Then the
видим,
air
как
is
воздух
heated up to
циркулирует
the
по
needed
салону. То
temperature,
есть он идет
and now we can
сверху
see
вниз
how the
в
air
пределах одного блока
circulates
кресел. Вот более
around
наглядный
the
вариант.
cabin within
Мы
one
видим,
row
как
of seats.
использованный воздух
There is
частично
another
выводится,
option here.
а
We can see that
частично,
some of the
собственно,
air is
отправляется
partially
через
removed,
HEPA-фильтры на
and some of the
повторную
air goes through
циркуляцию.
HEPA filters for recirculation.
Да, спасибо
Мария,
огромное. Да,
да.
вопрос, давайте.
Я
So I'm ready for
понял,
questions.
что HEPA-фильтры используются уже
Yes,
довольно
I understood that
долгое
HEPA
время.
filters have been in
Скажите,
use for a
за
long time.
время
Now,
пандемии
can you tell us,
были ли
during the pandemic,
авиапроизводителями, может быть, изобретены или реализованы какие-то новые меры
did
безопасности,
the
может быть, те же самые фильтры?
aviation manufacturers invent
На
any
самом деле, те
more
фильтры,
advanced
которые сейчас
filters?
есть, они достаточно
Answer.
эффективны. То есть мы,
Well,
как
actually, the
производитель, мы
filters we
не
currently
разрабатываем
have
фильтры,
are
да, то
efficient
есть есть
enough.
специальные поставщики, которым
We,
этим
as
занимаются.
manufacturers, do not
Любой
design
производитель так или иначе
filters.
следит
There are
за
suppliers of
изменениями,
filters,
да,
but any
происходящими в этой
manufacturer
области. Но,
keeps
честно говоря,
track
вот те фильтры,
of the
которые
changes
сейчас
in this
есть,
area.
да, и
But to be
устанавливаются в
honest, the
самолетах,
filters
они
that we have
действительно там
now
ну,
that
показывают
are
очень высокую
installed
эффективность. Тут вопрос, как бы
on
очень часто
planes
возникает,
are
да,
very
конечно,
efficient.
все ваши эти HEPA-фильтры, это, конечно, все супер, да, ну, а вот
Of
кто мне
course, some people
гарантирует,
ask
да,
me,
что,
well, your
например,
HEPA filters
авиакомпания
are
их
cool,
меняет, да,
but
потому
who
что мы
can
все понимаем,
guarantee
что есть
that
определенные
the airline
регламенты, да,
changes
по
them?
замене
Because we understand that there
компонентов,
is
да,
a
но
certain
тут как бы
regulation
могу
saying
сказать с
that some
уверенностью, что
components should be
мы все
changed
понимаем, что в
or
авиации самое
replaced.
главное это
But we
безопасность,
all
да,
understand
есть
that
определенные
safety
регламенты работ,
is paramount
определенные
in
регламенты по
aviation.
замене
There are certain
компонентов, агрегатов,
regulations
и,
for
собственно,
the
авиакомпании
replacement
все
of
это соблюдают,
components
да,
or
потому что
blocks,
мы,
and all
ну, как бы
airlines follow those
безопасность,
rules.
любой тип безопасности, да, сейчас как бы вообще, в принципе, вот этот вот вопрос
Because safety
безопасности на
is
борту самолета в
always
контексте, да,
critical for
эпидемии,
any
мне кажется,
airline,
как
and
бы
safety on
приобрел
board a plane during the
уровень мирового,
pandemic
вышел на мировой уровень мирового масштаба, поэтому
is
здесь
now
как бы
a
все
global
обязательно за
scale
этим следят.
issue.
Но пока
So
каких-либо
everyone keeps
именно
track of
новинок с
that.
точки зрения фильтров, ну потому что
For the time
система
being,
очень
there are
хорошо
no
работает,
innovations in
и
terms
каждый
of filters
должны
because the
понимать, что
system is
любой
already
новый
working very
компонент,
well.
который так или иначе
And
вводится,
we
он
need to
должен
understand that
пройти
any new
сертификацию,
component
исследование. Это такой, ну,
that is
достаточно
designed
длительный
has
процесс.
to
Пока
go
что
through
посмотреть на
certification.
как
That's a
бы
pretty
то, что
lengthy
есть на рынке,
process.
да, производители
And we
понимают,
are
что вот
looking
то,
at
что
what's
сейчас находится в самолетах, да, оно
already on the
соответствует
market,
самым высоким стандартам, да, и
so
обеспечивает
that whatever
необходимый
we
уровень
have on board
безопасности,
a
ну,
plane
высокий уровень
is up to the
безопасности.
highest
Вот так.
standards and
Единственное, вот
guarantees
рекомендации, которые мы дали, это включать
a high
систему
level of security
кондиционирования
and safety.
обязательно, ну,
We
как бы
only gave one
рекомендуем,
more
опять же, да, то есть мы не
recommendation,
можем
switching on the
настаивать, да,
conditioning system
включать систему
before the
кондиционирования и
passengers
фильтрации
enter the
как раз до
plane,
посадки. Вот так. Потому что обычно
before the
это идет на
landing,
первую линию включается.
because
Ну,
before
чтобы уже, когда
that
пассажиры
was
сходили,
during
тогда
at
там уже
the
был уже отфильтрованный
steering
воздух. Вот так.
stage, so that when passengers
Я
enter a
просто помню
plane, the
первые,
air is
может быть,
already
месяцы
filtered.
после начала пандемии некоторые авиакомпании продолжали полеты, и при этом на борту предпринимались, ну, какие-то супермеры безопасности, были
I remember that
воротники в
before the start
каких-то
of the
скафандрах,
pandemic,
или
there
как это
was a
назвать.
lot of safety.
Сейчас
Но это
стал
The
решение
flight
заметен масса
attendants were in
Да-да-да,
special
это понятно,
suits.
что они там во многом перестраховывались, но
I
на
сейчас
самом
understand
деле,
that
требуют
they
кстати,
were
больше.
некоторые
trying to
авиакомпании
play safe,
продолжают,
but
по-моему,
why
катарцев
do
я
we have the
видела,
changes
особенно
now?
первых классов, там
Well, I
тоже
know that
вот такое
some
вот
airlines
операционных халатов.
are still
Ну, то есть
continuing those safety
оно
measures.
варьирует от
They
авиакомпании,
have
от
those
авиакомпании,
surgery
действительно, потому что
robes, but that
есть
depends on
некие
the airline
рекомендации, да, то
because
есть
there
мы со
are
своей
certain
стороны, например, рекомендуем
recommendations.
пассажирам носить маски, да,
For
считаем это
example, on our
эффективным
part, we
средством
recommend
защиты.
that
Как раз мой
our
следующий слайд
passengers
хотела вот там
wear
поделиться
masks. We believe
исследованием,
that
которое
this is
проведено было
effective.
недавно.
And you can see
Вот,
at this
то, что
slide,
речь зашла про
this
те средства защиты, которые
survey
мы как
was carried
производители
out recently,
рекомендуем, да,
and we are talking about
носить на
protective
борту, да,
measures that
это
we
маски.
recommend on
Такая
board.
забавная
Those measures
инфографика.
include
На самом
masks,
деле
and
достаточно
there is some
серьезное
infographics
исследование,
here,
которое,
but actually the
мне
research was
кажется,
quite
ну, несколько
serious.
месяцев проводилось
It lasted
про наш
for a few
IATA. IATA
months
буквально, мне кажется, наверное,
under
полторы
the
недели
auspices
назад
of
озвучила
IATA,
результаты этого исследования.
and IATA
В исследовании
named the
участвовали не только
results
Airbus, еще Boeing,
of this
Embraer. И
research.
примечательно интересный тот
Airbus,
факт,
Boeing,
что
and
каждый из
Embraer
производителей,
participated in the
ну,
research,
использовал,
and each
да,
of the
свои системы,
manufacturers
технологии, разработки, но при
used
этом
their own
как
systems
каждый из
and
этих производителей, конечно, пришел к
technologies,
одному и тому
but
же выводу,
each
да, что, в
of
принципе,
those
доказывает, что,
manufacturers came to the same
наверное, как
conclusion,
бы, все
which
те заявления,
proves
которые делались, да, они сейчас теперь подкреплены уже такими доказанными результатами. В
that
чем
there
состояло
is
это исследование?
some
Была
evidence
создана, ну,
which
могу
is
рассказать, что мы
now
делали. Я думаю, что примерно
confirmed
другие
again.
производители
What was this
похожие
research about?
делали
I can tell you what we
исследования
did.
и
I
изучали
guess that other
ситуацию.
manufacturers
Была
also
сделана
did
компьютерная 3D
research.
модель,
We
которая
did a computer
моделирует
3D model
распределение воздуха в
which
салоне в
models the
самолете
distribution
и
of
воздуха
air
при разных ситуациях.
in
Условно
an
посадили, как
airplane
мы
cabin
видим
in different
на слайде 3
situations.
пассажиров, которые
And on
сидят,
this slide, you can see 3
это плотная
passengers
рассадка. На самом деле сейчас для многих,
who are
возможно, это будет
sitting
дискомфортная рассадка.
next to each other.
Вот,
For
но для
many
этого
people,
как
it will
раз-таки
not be very
проводилось
comfortable
исследование.
now, but this is why
Сидят
we
они
did this
плотно друг к
research.
другу, это экономический класс
So you can
институции
see
граждан
that the
самолета.
passengers
Вот.
sit side by
И
side.
дальше
This
при
is
помощи
the
вот
economy
этих
class
3D-моделей
of a narrow body
проводились
airplane.
всевозможные
And
оценки потоков
with the
воздуха
help
при
of
условии,
3D
что
models,
один из пассажиров
we
зевает, чихает,
evaluated
кашляет, и
different
дальше
possibilities
уже
for air
смотрели,
circulation.
как
We
частицы
suppose that one of the
воздуха распространяются
passengers
по салону,
tried sneezing, coughing,
какие
and then we
частицы воздуха
saw the
могут попасть
particles
другому пассажиру,
distributing
да, соседу,
along
да,
the
либо,
cabin.
например,
We could
пассажирам,
see
которые
what particles
сидят
could get
как бы на ряду
on other
как бы впереди
passengers,
либо сзади.
on the
Ну,
passengers
скажем
in
так, в результате просто там
the
огромное
row
количество
ahead or the
параметров
row behind.
анализировалось. Я
So
вот
we
примерно
analyzed a
50
huge
миллионов
number of
параметров
parameters.
оценивалось. И, собственно, производители пришли к такому выводу,
And the
что
manufacturers drew the conclusion
благодаря вот как раз-таки системе распределения воздуха, которую я
that
сказала,
the
да,
air distribution
тем
system
фильтрам,
I
которые фильтруют
mentioned, and
воздух, да, там, на
the HEPA filters that
99%,
filter air by
ситуация, когда люди сидят на
99.99%,
расстоянии примерно
a
30
situation
метров
where
друг от
people
друга, да,
are
это
just
плотная
30
рассадка в
centimeters from each
экономическом классе,
other. This
она
is the
эквивалентна
compact
тому, как
seating
если
in the
бы
economy
мы
class.
находились от этого человека на расстоянии 2 метров.
So it's the
То
same
есть
as
полное
if we
соблюдение
were
социальной
at a distance
дистанции,
of 2
которая
meters from
рекомендована
here.
ВОЗ.
So
Но
this is
здесь
within
очень
the
важный момент, потому
WHO,
что
the
исследование проводилось при
WHO social
условии,
distancing
что все
rules.
пассажиры носят маски.
but the condition was that all the passengers were wearing masks. So we, as manufacturers, support this recommendation, and we believe that during the pandemic, it is very important to wear masks. But even if the people sit very close to each other, well, it's hard to believe that. But it is the same as if they were within 2 meters from each other, not on the plane, but somewhere else. Furthermore, we could see that the backs of the seats in front and back are also a barrier for particles. So if we are on board a plane, we should not be afraid if a passenger behind us starts sneezing, because the back of the seat functions as a barrier. Maria, and I have another question. Is there a need to clean the cabin after each flight? And what about those HEPA filters? It's the generation of the HEPA filters you are talking about. They have been installed on aircraft since what year? Well, I can't tell you anything with respect to other producers. I can only talk about Airbus. As for Airbus, we check the serial numbers, and all the airplanes are with HEPA filters. There are newer models such as A350 and more modern ones, so they are going to differ a bit according to the type of the airplane. But we looked at all the airplanes starting from A320 and A330. A320s are a bit outdated right now, they are for cargo transport, but we do have those filters on all A320s and of course all A350s. As for the sanitation, I would like to show you this slide. We had this moment here. We talked about sanitation on board the plane, and as equipment manufacturers we work close with different companies, we work with suppliers, we study new advanced and promising technologies, and we believe that ultraviolet rays and air ionization are also very important. And there is also a new generation of antiseptics which function for about 5 days, and they are quite effective as well. So this is what we have when talking to airlines, and this is what we suggest to them as replacing or additional methods. To conclude, there is another interesting slide which shows what could change in a cabin in the near future because of the pandemic. As a manufacturer, we can see that contactless technologies have a great potential. This concerns mostly the toilet rooms. Even now there are solutions, and we offer those solutions to airlines. These solutions regard contactless water flush, contactless taps, antimicrobial materials. And this research is currently active. We will be ready to offer those solutions in the near future, but that depends on the airline. So we can implement those systems on a functioning airplane. Yes, that's right, or a retrofit can be done. This system can be installed on airplanes that are already flying. So we do offer these solutions, but it's up to the airline to decide. To conclude, I would like to tell you that we should not be afraid of flying. Flying is great. It is safe on board a plane. That's everything I wanted to tell you now. Maria, thank you very much for your very informative presentation. We hurry a little bit, choosing
участника.
trains instead of planes, it would seem. And now I invite
Наталья.
our next participant, Natalia.
Меня слышно?
Can you
Наталья
hear me?
Горинова. Этихад. Наталья.
Yes, this is Natalia
Да,
Gorinova,
очень приятно.
Да,
Добрый день.
Etihad
с
Airways.
авиакомпаниями у нас...
Nice to meet you.
Так, я слышу какой-то на фоне... все, уже не слышу.
I can see some background noise. Well, it's okay now.
Недавно буквально было объявлено на прошлой неделе об открытии авиасообщения с Абу-Даби. Пока, насколько я понимаю, вопрос не решен окончательно.
Quite recently, air transportation with Abu Dhabi was announced. Is it resolved now? What's happening on this destination? Can we expect more flights?
Да, на самом деле, на прошлой неделе Абу-Даби
Well, actually, last
вошел
week,
в список
Abu
городов,
Dhabi
разрешенных для международных
made
перелетов,
it
что
on the
для
list
большой
of
радости.
cities
Знаем, до недавнего
permitted
момента
for
только
travel, and
Дубай
we were very
разрешен,
happy for that,
Париж
about that,
программе
because
выполняется,
before
то есть в общей сложности 4 в
there were
неделю.
only 2 flights to
Пока это
Dubai,
только новость на
and that
государственном
is
уровне.
4
Можно сказать, что
flights per week.
авиакомпания
Right
приложила
now,
к
this
этому
is a
усилия,
government level decision,
вовлекая также и посольство
and I would like to add that
Эмиратов,
the
Министерство
Embassy of the United
транспорта
Arab Emirates
Объединенных
was
Арабских
also
Эмиратов,
involved, as well as
так
the
что
Ministry
квота
of
расширена.
Transport
Теперь
of the United
остается
Arab
нам
Emirates.
определиться
So
с
this
теми
quota
днями
has been expanded, and now
недели,
we
так что
still
теперь мы
need
можем
to
летать,
define
поскольку
the days of the
разрешение
week
пока только на 2
where we can fly,
выполнения полетов 2
because
раза в
right
неделю.
now
И,
there are only
собственно,
permissions for
подать
2 flights per
заявку
week,
на выполнение рейсов
and it's
в
also
Росавиацию
very
получить
important
разрешение
to
Росавиации.
send
Но в данный момент
an
у нас
offer
стоят рейсы
to
с 24
Rosaviatsia to
ноября.
get
На самом
permission
деле
from
это
that.
они стояли изначально, были и раньше, но мы вынуждены были снимать рейсы из-за того, что не было разрешения на полет в Абу-Даби. Мы надеемся, что
Before that, there was
25
no permission to fly
ноября,
to Abu Dhabi, but we
самый
hope that
поздний
on the
срок, когда мы
25th
сможем
of
полететь.
November,
Надо
and that's
отметить,
the
что, к
latest
сожалению, пока Абу-Даби как
day
Эмират,
where we
в
can
отличие от
fly
Дубая,
to
еще
Abu
закрыт
Dhabi.
для туристов,
I should say
не
that
выдаются туристические визы для россиян. Это
right
очень
now
сложно
this
по
destination is still
но,
closed
в
for
принципе, все вот эти
tourists. There are no
нотифицированные действия с
permissions,
визами сейчас
but
приостановлены. Разрешено
right now those
летать только
processes with
резидентам
visas
или
are
гражданам
suspended, and only
Объединенных Арабских
residents
Эмиратов или
or
органов
citizens of
определенного
the United Arab
разрешения.
Emirates
Поэтому
can
мы
go
на
there,
первых порах
or
наших
people
полетов
having some
сможем
permissions.
рассчитывать на транзит. И
So
для
at
этого
the
нам
early
с учетом
stages, we can
выполнения
also
полетов всего
hope
2
for
раза в неделю
transit
нужно очень
flight.
тщательно подбирать
And given
те
that we
самые
can only do
пункты
2
и
flights per
возможные
week,
стыковки
we need to
с теми
choose
странами,
the
куда
days of the
возможно
week very
наши
thoroughly,
граждане
and we need
полетят.
to think
Опять-таки,
about the possible
прекрасно отдавать
connections
себе отчет в том, что
with
летать сейчас, наверное,
countries where
транзитные
our passengers
перелеты
could fly.
не
But we
так
do understand that
востребованы,
transit
как
flights
остальные.
are not in great
Мы это
demand,
понимаем.
unlike
Тем не
direct flights at the
менее,
moment.
это
We do
по
understand
большей
that.
части касается туристов, которые хотят отдохнуть и по
But
возможности
nevertheless, this mostly
безопасно и быстро
concerns
вернуться,
tourists
если что,
that
но тем не менее с
would like to
учетом
have a
всех
great rest
инцидентов,
and
дипломатии, и
come back
моряки,
safely.
и
But there are
просто
also other
родственники,
segments of
студенты и так
travelers,
далее.
such
Тем
as
не менее,
relatives,
остается тоже необходимость путешествия. И у нас на данный
diplomats,
момент наша маршрутная сетка
businessmen who
практически
still need to
восстановлена
travel.
более чем на 80%.
So right
В принципе,
now
все страны мы покрываем.
we have recovered the
Поэтому
possibility
нам
of
будет что
traveling.
предложить
That's about 80%, so we will have
потенциальным
something to
гостям.
offer.
Я так понимаю, что,
As far as I
как вы уже
understand,
сказали, поскольку большинство
and you
маршрутов
already
этих
said
карт
that,
по миру уже восстановлены, на
most of the
какие...
routes
И
are
при этом вам
already
нужно как-то
recovered
адаптироваться
globally
под
for
запросы россиян,
Etihad,
потому что, по
but
сути,
you still have to adapt
те
yourselves
самолеты, которые
to
будут приезжать,
the needs of
прилетать
Russians,
из
because
Москвы,
all those
это будет
airplanes that
целиком
are
транзитный трафик.
going to come from
Соответственно, вам нужно
Moscow
будет подгадывать
are going to be
выездные,
transit traffic.
стыковочные
So
рейсы
you
по
will
другим направлениям,
need to think
таким
about
образом,
the
чтобы
connections
минимально
to other
сократить
destinations.
время пребывания в аэропорту. На
so
какие
that
направления
you can
планируется делать
reduce the
ставку?
time
Я думаю, что, скорее всего, это
during
Индийский
which a
океан,
passenger stays in the airport.
возможно, какие-то другие
So,
востребованные
what
туристические
destinations are you
направления.
focusing
Расскажите
on? Maybe
подробнее.
it's the Indian Ocean or other
Да,
tourist
хороший вопрос, но, к
destinations.
сожалению, из
Tell us
туристических
in greater
направлений
detail,
выбор на
please.
данный момент
Well,
невелик,
that's a good question, but
поскольку
right now
далеко
there
не все
are
туристические направления
not
открыты для россиян.
many
Наши люди могут спокойно
tourist
полететь без
destinations at the moment
карантина.
because not all of those
В
destinations
первую
are
очередь
open
это,
for
наверное,
Russians.
Мальдивы, потому что и Мальдивы
Russians will
разрешены
have
и
to
нашим правительством
do a quarantine
открыты для
after their
путешествий,
return.
и Мальдивы принимают
The
российских
Russian
туристов
government
без
also
особых
opened the
осложнений.
Maldive Islands for, well, as a
Одним из наиболее
destination, and the
востребованных
Maldive
направлений всегда
Islands
считался
accept
Таиланд.
Russian
Таиланд
tourists
недавно
without any
открыл свои границы,
complications.
но
Thailand used to
путешествия
be
туда
a
очень
complex
сильно
country.
осложнено
It
крайними
recently opened up its
ограничениями,
borders, but
связанными
traveling
с
there still
множеством
has a lot of
разрешений и
restrictions because
прохождением
you need to
карантина и так
get
далее,
lots
поэтому
of
мы не ожидаем
permissions
практически
and
никакого
undergo a
трафика, за исключением
quarantine.
там
So we are not
дипломатов.
expecting any
Так что, наверное,
traffic
в первую
except for
очередь это будут
diplomats, maybe.
Мальдивы и
So these are going to
в
be
небольшом
the
количестве какие-то
Maldives,
направления,
and to a certain
наверное,
extent
опять-таки в своей массе это будут не
some other
туристы,
destinations.
потому что
But these are not going to be
все-таки
tourists, I
большинство стран
guess,
закрыто. Наверное,
because
Египет.
most countries are still closed. It might be
Мы
Egypt.
также ожидаем
Кстати,
спрос на Сейшелы. Да, но, к сожалению, Сейшелы пока еще закрыты для россиян. Вот. Остается
The
надеяться на
Seychelles
открытие
Islands are also
Абу-Даби как
closed for
Эмирата.
Russians.
Мы очень
We still
рассчитываем,
hope that Abu Dhabi
возможно,
will open
произойдет к
up
концу
like
этого года, возможно,
Emirates,
уже в начале
and it
декабря,
will
когда,
probably
собственно,
happen by
проблема
the end of
решается
this
сама
year,
собой.
maybe by early December. So we
Насколько я
hope that
знаю,
this problem will
вот, кстати, тоже было
be resolved by
отмечено,
itself.
по-
As far as
когда
we
мы
know,
говорили о том, что туристы пытаются
and
избегать
you mentioned this
транзитных
when you
рейсов,
said that
и они
tourists
избирают прямой перелет.
tried
В
to
то же
avoid
время мы
transit
знаем, что
flights
Этихад это и
and
вообще
choose
Абу-Даби,
direct flights. But we all
как
know
Эмират,
that Etihad and
они
Abu
уделяют
Dhabi
очень
in
большое
general,
внимание
like
именно
Emirates,
санитарной
pay a lot of
безопасности. И,
attention
пожалуй,
to sanitary
вот
protection and
авиакомпании
sanitary
Персидского
safety.
залива это не только Этихада
As for
касается.
the Persian
Это,
Gulf
скажем так, airlines,
Airlines, it's
которые
not just
наиболее
Etihad,
тщательно, наиболее
but it's
щепетильны в
the
вопросе
airlines which are
безопасности
very
перевозки.
thorough
То есть
about
ожидаете ли вы, что это станет
safety
одним из
issues.
ключом
So are
в
you
привлечении,
expecting
к возвращению
that
пассажиров,
it will be
скажем так, к возврату ваших клиентов?
a key to
Да, безусловно, это скажется,
getting your
но,
clients back?
разумеется, мы были одни из
Yes,
первых,
of
и,
course,
наверное,
it's an
наиболее
important
тщательным
argument,
образом подошли к вопросу безопасности перелета, именно вот с
and
точки
we approached the
зрения
issue of
инфицированных
flight safety
ковидом и так далее.
among the first
Была проведена
airlines.
колоссальная работа, но она была
We
проведена не для того, чтобы
did
не столько для
a
того,
huge
чтобы
job.
привлекать себе пассажиров, а чтобы действительно
Mostly we didn't want to
обеспечивать
attract
эту
passengers,
безопасность,
but we
чтобы
wanted
наши
to
гости были
ensure
уверены.
safety
И
so that
здесь,
our
наверное, этим
passengers
гордиться, сколько Этихад вложил именно
could
в эту
be
программу,
certain
которая у нас называется
that
Этихад
the
Wellness,
safety
и
issues
подошел к этому
were
достаточно
resolved.
серьезно и неформально. Если
And we did
можно
choose a very
сделать
serious
презентацию
approach.
буквально
It's not
пару
just a formality.
слайдов, да, я
If I may,
Наталья,
please
да,
open
про
a
проблемы со
presentation.
звуком
That's
сейчас
just a
были.
couple of
Да,
slides.
сейчас вроде нормально.
Natalia,
Ага.
we just had some
Можно
problems
открыть
with the sound.
слайды?
Right now it's okay. Yes, please
Поддерживаю,
open my slides
наверное, мои слова.
to support my
Есть
words.
даже специальные как бы сотрудники на борту, практически все являются, все наши
There are
бортпроводники,
dedicated
они
employees
являются так
on board the
называемыми
plane.
wellness-амбассадорами. Это не
Actually,
просто слово,
all
это с
our
этим
flight
связана специальная
attendants
подготовка.
are also wellness
Они достаточно
ambassadors.
хорошо
And it's
обучены
not
в
just
плане там
high-flown
возможного
words.
определения
There was
симптомов,
special
какой-то
training
первой
behind
помощи,
that.
рекомендаций и так далее.
Our
И
flight
также в
attendants are
аэропорту
well
Абу-Даби
trained in terms of determining
тоже
symptoms, providing
находятся эти
aid, and
wellness-амбассадоры,
so
которым
on.
всегда можно
We
задать
also
вопрос,
have
помогут
wellness
ли
ambassadors
аэропорт
at the
Абу-Даби
airport of
обеспечивать
Abu Dhabi.
реальную
The Abu
реальную
Dhabi
безопасность, то
airport
есть реально следить
provides
за
real
сохранением
safety.
социальной дистанции.
It really
Без
keeps an
контактных
eye on
технологий,
social
кстати, уже
distancing
работают в аэропорту Абу-Даби, например,
and
всегда
contactless
лифты
distances,
не
which
нужно
already
нажимать
work
кнопку
at the
лифта, то есть
airport.
поднесением
As
ладони,
you
ну,
call
таким,
a lift or an elevator, you
также
should not press a button, you don't need it. Furthermore, all passengers go through special booths where there is disinfection going on. So right now the passenger traffic is not very intensive because it's mostly transit, at the highest possible level. I could show you a small video of how an airplane is cleaned. As air traffic recovered, there were very few flights, but a lot of cabins were fully updated and all the upholstery was changed. So we did some very serious disinfection, which is going on a full basis. So please launch this video.
All Etihad aircraft are cleaned on arrival at every destination. Once the aircraft is made available for cleaning, we clean all areas within the cabin, which includes sidewall panels, seating area, lavatories, galleys, crew rest, flight deck. The product we use is both a cleaner and disinfectant. It's approved by the Department of Health and is 99.99% effective on all bacteria, germs and viruses. This includes COVID-19. The Bacabam product is effective for up to 10 days. Once the aircraft has been cleaned both in the cabin and in the cargo holds, the coaches that are transferred, the passengers that were on board, will be taken to an area where they are disinfected by my staff. Cabin air quality within the cabin is maintained through the HEPA filtration system. The HEPA filters work 99.97% effectiveness. On average, the air within the cabin is replaced every 3 minutes by fresh air from outside.
Наталья, скажите, а требуется ли тест на коронавирус при посадке на борт?
Natalia, can you tell us, do we need to take a coronavirus test when we get on board the plane? Yes, this is needed, that's right. Of course, every road kit includes a mask, gloves, an anti-sanitary gel. Furthermore, masks are replaced every 2 hours, so there is a reserve of masks. Furthermore, food is delivered to minimize contact. The logistics were changed in such a way that you don't need to take off and put on a mask again, so that people contact with flight attendants less. And there is also a special dedicated zone for the possible quarantine. Several seats are blocked for that purpose, and we don't arrange the passengers in a dense way. So, of course, the occupancy rate is low in order to observe those measures, but this also is the reason for low demand at this moment, but these are the realities. Right now, the airline does a lot of flights. Some of the demand has compensated the losses that we had from passenger transport. We also have a higher demand from cargo transport. Natalia, do you have a strategy to renew your work in Russia? And I'm talking about your tariff policy. Do you have plans to change tariffs, to cut prices? Maybe you want
Не
to
стоит говорить
increase
о
the
каких-то
prices on the
действительно
contrary.
резких переменах.
Well, we can't talk
Мы
about
всегда
any
ориентируемся
radical
на рынок.
changes
Естественно, цена
because
всегда
we are
зависит
always
от
looking
спроса,
at the
спроса
market,
и
and the price
предложения.
depends on
Но из
demand.
каких-то
That's both
новшеств
demand and
хочу
supply.
отметить, что
As
что
for
тоже ввели международные
novelties,
тарифы. И
right now we have
тарифная сетка будет
luggage-free
расширена,
tariffs,
она уже
and
расширена,
we will
предлагая
have an expanded
промежуточный выбор с учетом
tariff
индивидуальных
plan,
потребностей, потому что не
which
всем
will
может
give you
все.
more choice based on your individual
Вот
needs,
стратегия
because not everyone needs everything.
больше на индивидуализацию, то есть возможность
So our overall
гостям выбирать
strategy
тот набор
is
услуг
about
и по цену, которые они
individualization,
готовы заплатить
so
за тот
that
набор услуг, который действительно
passengers
необходим.
can pay the
Вот,
price
поэтому
for those services that they really need.
у нас нет планов
So we don't have any plans
максимизировать нашу маржу в связи с тем, что
to
небольшие
maximize
загрузки.
our
Также,
margin
наверное, нет
because
планов
of
каких-то
the low occupancy rate,
супердешевых предложений,
and
которые
we
просто делают
are
выполнение
not
рейсов
expecting
нецелесообразным.
super
То есть мы
cheap
будем соблюдать тот
offers.
самый баланс, о котором
As a result, our
Леонид
flights will not
говорил
pay
ранее в
back.
своем выступлении.
We will stick to the balance that Leonid mentioned in his presentation.
Хорошо, Наталья, спасибо большое. У нас последний
Well, thank you very much, Natalia.
докладчик Том Сандерсон.
And right now we are going to have our last speaker, Tom Edison, VP Sales at Airbalter. Hello, Toms. Well, actually, Airbaltic is one of the few companies that fully stopped or suspended its work during the coronavirus pandemic. It was not very agreeable to lose your income for a long period, but maybe it was also an opportunity to rethink your strategy. So what happened during those 2 months? How did Airbaltic change? Well, we had a great January and a great February, and we had great plans for this year. We had an increase of about 20%, and we were planning to open 14 new destinations. But unfortunately, we know what happened in March at a certain moment. People did not attend those flights, and then a decision was taken to stop the flights completely. The situation was very special in Latvia. For 62 days we didn't have any flights. But our first plans included the start of flights on the 14th of April, and we were reviewing our business plan. Our plan was called Destination 2025, and we planned for 65 aircraft by 2025. But when the flights were closed, we had 38 airplanes, and we decided that we would stop using old Boeings and turboprops. That was supposed to be happen 2 years later, but we did it a bit faster, and we decided that we will launch new Airbus airplanes, Airbus 1020. They are new airplanes, and we have the newest aviation fleet in Europe. The average age of our planes is less than 2 years, and we also have the greenest airplanes that are available. As a result, we are able to sell cheaper seats. And as a result, we decided to start our flights on the 18th of May. We started growing a little bit. We started adding new destinations and flights. And it was said by other colleagues that 71% of passengers wanted to fly. And this is the case because we had great growth in July and August. In spring, we lost a lot of tour operators who cancelled all the flights. But when we started flying again in July and August, we had a great occupancy for those flights. These were passengers who wanted to fly on their vacation. Of course, we need to reconsider our product. That's what's been mentioned here regarding masks, regarding greater distances between people, and everything that we do on board a plane to make sure that it's safe. And we need some flexibility. We need to be able to change our tickets because people do want to have confidence that they will be able to change something. So we did this as well, and early in March we reorganized our activities. Unfortunately, we lost some of our personnel, but what we currently have, our airplanes, are going to fly. As for July and August, these were excellent months, but unfortunately, starting from September, the statistics went worse in European countries and lockdowns started. So these lockdowns are the main restraining factor for passengers at the moment. Because of course we want to fly, but if we fly somewhere and there is a quarantine there, it just doesn't work. And right now we have 4 or 5 countries where we don't need this quarantine. The winter season starts next week, and we have prepared a list of destinations. It's about 40% less than last year, according to our plans. I'm talking about destinations. But we are a small, flexible company that can resume its flights very quickly if there is an opportunity. But something needs to be done with this quarantine. Maybe some tests, maybe there will be a vaccine. This is the restraining factor. So that's it. Regarding the quarantine, by the way, we haven't touched upon this subject yet, but IATA and many airlines have repeatedly said that quarantines need to be cancelled. We just need to test all the passengers at airports. Now that you are closer to Europe, can you tell us whether it's realistic to do this? I know that many European airports are introducing capacities for testing their passengers. Is it being done on a mass scale? And does it really help to recover the passenger traffic? Well, right now we are not there yet. The Europeans are only talking about introducing the same rules. For example, in Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia, everyone has their own rules, so the rules are very different everywhere. We haven't agreed about one single set of rules. And furthermore, it's very important that airlines, IATA, and other organizations insist on a single method of testing. But there is no single solution for it being. But we should have it. In case of Latvia, the tourist business is about 3% of GDP, so it's really very important to restart those flights in full. As for Airbalter, before the corona crisis, as I would call it, this airline was very popular as a transit company. There were flights all over Europe via Riga. So do you have a possibility to restart your work in Russia as a transit company? If some countries are still closed for Russians, but Latvian airports can serve as a transit point. So, as a result, we can offer flights to those countries that are ready to accept Russians. So can Airbalter offer such a service? Yes, we can offer this, but I don't think we can earn money on that. because we mostly have a point-to-point flow. This is our basic flow. Transit services are something complementary, but we do still work with Sheremetyevo, and we also had some destinations such as Yekaterinburg and others. So we are not expecting to open those destinations, and we are going to look for a new season in November, maybe December. But transit is not a big part of our business. Last summer, we had 5 million passengers, so we actually do need this transit business, and we will probably go back to it.
Скажите, а политика Европы по открытию
So
границ?
what's
Я
the
знаю, что
European
есть
policy with respect to
некая
opening up?
консолидированная позиция, что вот Европа, если
Is
открывается
there
для какой-то
a
страны, то она
consolidated
открывается вся.
position? If Europe
То
is
есть,
open
собственно,
for
можно
a
ехать в любую
country,
часть Европы.
the
Но при
entire
этом
Europe is
открытие
opened.
авиасообщения и
But
въезд это ведь
as
не всегда
for
одно и то же, потому
aviation
что в случае с транзитными
communication, it's not the
авиакомпаниями
same thing because
это могут быть
with transit
именно
airlines,
работа на транзит. То есть вам привезли самолет, вы этот самолет
you might
куда-то
only
дальше
work
повезли. Я вот, собственно, про это спрашиваю.
for transit.
Есть ли возможность для открытия
An
авиасообщения
airplane
между Латвией и
got to
Россией вот именно
your
на
country
транзит?
and then it
То есть не
went
открытие
further.
границ для въезда.
So, is there a possibility for transit here? I think we don't have such control. As for the European Union, the only destination we currently have is with Tbilisi, and there is an agreement with that destination, but we don't have this overall control. Once again, we could not actually continue transit within those point-to-point destinations. And of course, people always get where they want, maybe by bus, maybe via some other countries. So I have a feeling that you can even go to Lisbon. But this is another story. As for Latvia and Estonia, the infection rate is quite low, so the government is still trying to hold the number of cases of infected people low, so we have quite strict rules. You have reconsidered your business model, you have reduced your fleet, you have one single type of aircraft. So how did that affect your tariff policy? Were you able to optimize your cost? Were you able to offer better tariffs as a result? Well, I already said that our plan to move on to a single type of aircraft is something that was already there. Our plan was for 2021, 2023, but it was clear that we needed cheaper aircraft with cheaper seats because of our competitive environment, and our current aircraft is cheaper. So as a result, we can offer better prices than for older Boeings. So in principle, we will be able to offer better prices. Once again, that's a question of demand and supply. As one of the previous colleagues said, there is demand and supply, there are two sides. But at this moment, I would say that during this pandemic, the occupancy rate is quite low. We will still try to keep the prices to those destinations at the same level, but we are not getting any big margin. But do you still have the routes for destinations where there is no quarantine, where you don't need to wait for those 14 days of quarantine if you go from Latvia, for example? Yes, we still have these routes, and this gives a good hope to me, because, for example, such destination as Cyprus, there were 5 flights per day last Saturday. those
И то, что мы
destinations
видим,
without
и в июне
quarantine
тоже.
are in
И
demand.
даже некоторые направления, которые, вот, например, та же самая Италия, было такое
And there are
немножко,
some other
ну,
destinations, for example, to
предвзятость, когда
Italy.
все это началось, вот не может быть, что
There
там
used
все
to be a
плохо, все
bias when it all
плохо,
started.
окончилось это тем, что
Everything
изначально
seemed to be
мы
bad
могли
in
хотели
Italy.
запускать в августе, и мы
But
его перенесли в начало июня.
actually,
Все хорошо
we were
запомнилось.
planning
Так что, ну,
to launch Milan in
люди
August,
хотят,
but
хотят
we
этих
brought it forward
71%, хотя
to
это может
early
не шутка
July
такое, такая
because
цифра есть, она подтвердилась.
71%
То,
of
что
passengers
намного,
want
прежде
to fly,
намного
and it's not a
есть
joke.
трафик, да,
There is a
целевой
confirmation to
трафик,
that.
но для этого, ну, надо будет
But
всё-таки, наверное,
of course,
тесты
we
и
need
карантины,
to
какие-то новые
support our
системы.
business
Конечно, если
traffic.
будет вакцина
Maybe we
какая-то
need
универсальная,
quarantines, maybe
это
we need
просто
new
вопрос
systems.
решен.
If there is a universal
Но в данный
vaccine,
момент
then
идет
this
зима.
issue will be resolved, of course. So we are
Ну,
just
ваш
waiting for
прогноз на зиму,
winter.
насколько тяжела она для вас будет?
So what's your forecast for winter? Is it
Негативный,
going to
позитивный?
be a difficult one? Do you
Мы
have a positive
эту
or a
зиму
negative
переживем, это точно,
forecast?
да, потому что
Well, we will
то,
survive
что
this winter, of
случилось во
course.
время
That's for
этого,
sure.
ну, остановки и репланирования, то, что наш собственник решил
We already had this
резко
suspension and
увеличить
replanning,
свою долю.
and
Так что у
our
нас
owner actually decided
ситуация
to
довольно стабильная,
increase
мы точно
its
продержимся еще
share in the
какое-то
company. So
время.
our financial situation is
И вот
stable.
зимний сезон
We can
тем более
survive
у нас
for
есть
some more
полный
time.
список,
And
всё
we
происходит
already
продажи
have
на счет России. Мы
a list of
надеемся, что человек
destinations,
покупает
so we
хоть
do
Троицк,
the
хоть
sales,
Румынию.
so we really hope that Moscow and St.
Следующее лето
Petersburg
мы
will open up
планируем уже
at a certain point.
нормальный
And then
прирост понемножку с апреля,
we will be
разраститься вот все эти
expecting a
направления,
normal
которые мы
growth
закрыли. И, ну, в
for those
принципе,
destinations
наш
that we are
план еще
planning.
50 бортов к 2025 году остается.
As for 50 airports by 2025,
И
Хорошо,
we
то, что мы
still have
сделаем,
this
то, что
plan.
да.
Да. Большое
спасибо.
спасибо.
All right.
Я
Thank you very
предлагаю
much,
тогда нам
Tom.
вернуть всех
Right
наших
now, I
участников.
suggest that all our
Видишь, что Лев
speakers
пока к нам
are
не
once
присоединился,
again
но вот он
visible.
вынужден был отключиться, он вот буквально
One of
секунду
them
минут
is
с нами
still
вернется. Я
absent.
предлагаю
He
уже
had
подводить
to
итоги.
switch off, but he is
Дмитрий,
planning to
вам
turn back.
слово.
Now I
Когда
suggest that
вообще,
we draw some
насколько
conclusions.
реалистично
Dmitry, the
возвращение
floor is yours. Is it
пассажиропотока
realistic
международного
to expect a
тем
recovery
уровням,
of the
которые были
international
до
passenger flow
коронавируса?
to the
Я знаю,
levels that
что
we had
IATA
before the
озвучивала
coronavirus?
цифру
I know that
2024 год.
IATA
Может быть, в России это произойдет
said it
быстрее.
would happen in 2024, but maybe it will happen faster in Russia. Well, you know, Russia is a unique country. If we talk about aviation, we have our domestic flights, and thanks to that, we were able to recover faster. Maybe some destinations will be recovered in 2022, but 2021 is going to be a transitional period. So we need to plan our future, regardless of what's happening now. So I think that those issues involving flight safety, the accessibility of traveling. If you look at Russian companies, they don't increase the average price, even despite the increase in the currency rate. That's about 30%. Looking at those destinations which are already opened or which are opening up, just recently I heard some information that Thailand is opening up as well. Yes, and I heard that the first plane from China arrived. For those people who want to travel to Thailand, that's also a possibility. This doesn't concern the entire tourist industry. And given that we are planning the next season, it's clear that there will be no early booking. In aviation, unlike tourism, people buy tickets much later. They do not buy tickets in advance. Usually it's 3 to 5 days before the flight. and this says about much. So this is the way in which we are going to continue our business. Of course, it's very difficult to plan our business, but in any case, looking at the current situation, and by the way, one of the previous speakers mentioned that we are at the first stage for now. We didn't have any bankruptcies, and this is also very important. There are some delayed commitments that we are going to fulfill with respect to tourists, and that's also very important. As for aviators, the possibility to rebook a ticket, if we talk about a voucher, it's also an opportunity.
Хорошо, спасибо. Так,
Okay, thank you very much.
Леонид там подключился снова.
And Leonid is here with us again. That's good. Okay, Leonid, is there a chance that we will not see any serious losses for aviation, that the market will recover, and that everyone will find the balance between demand and the margin?
Леонид, вас не слышно.
Leonid, we can't hear you.
Нет, не слышно. Нет.
No, we can't hear Leonid.
Так, давайте тогда переключимся к Марии.
All right, let's switch to Maria. All right, we can hear you, Leonid. I apologize, my mic was off. I think that no one can make a forecast as to what is going to happen in the near future now. Whether we are going to see any balance in the industry. Most likely, we will need to wait till the end of this year and get ready for a recovery, because this year alone IATA changed its forecast for recovery of the entire industry 4 times, and right now we can't be very optimistic. But all the experts, including airlines, IT companies and IATA, believe that distribution will decline this year and next year. So I believe that the next 3 or 4 years will not be very good years. They will be quite complex ones, but everything depends on how the markets are going to respond. My message to the listeners is as following, and we have a lot of tour agents and tour companies with us. I am all for technologies. Many market players used this moment to rethink their technologies, because everything regarding access to booking, the possibility to compare tariffs from different sources, is what is going to play a major role next year. Dmitry said, airlines' approaches offering different tariffs, minimal tariffs, recoverable tariffs, replaceable tariffs. In the near future, we are going to be able to combine different tariffs in a new format, to which the market is not used to. It will be the traditional format and the new format, and I think that sooner or later we are going to see a larger amount of low-budget airlines. Many European companies are expecting for the moment to arrive to go to Russia, so I believe that it is very important to learn how to cooperate and to work with a lot of aviation content. And we will certainly have demand. Talking about distribution, as for tickets that can't be bought back or can't be cancelled, will their share go down? I think that we are at a transformation stage now. The whole world is changing. All the distribution models are changing. There are new tariff plans, and this is a feature of our era. Before that, airlines used a lot of distribution agents, but today airlines do their best to be closer to their customers, to do without consolidators, for example. But I think that demand will also regulate the supply that exists on the market. And of course, there should be much more offers.
Из-за текущего состояния пандемии не будет внедрена полноценно в 2020 году, если вы помните.
New technologies will not be fully implemented in 2020. You do remember about IATA's concept of 2020, where 20 airlines wanted to have 20% of their tariffs in the NDC format. So we will probably have a revolutionary 2021 year where we will have a change in the offer. So it will be 21-21, right? Maria, concerning the safety measures that are being implemented by airlines all over the world, what is temporary? What is going to stay with us for a long time? Well, to be honest, we need to take a look. All airlines are taking different safety measures. Of course, sanitation of airplanes was there before, and it will stay in the future. As for masks, it all depends on recommendations of the World Health Organization, because it's not airlines and not aircraft manufacturers that can influence this situation. There are certain recommendations that need to be followed. So we fully support those recommendations, and we do believe that masks ensure sufficient protection. Maybe there will be more contactless technologies that I mentioned. But right now, those contactless technologies started appearing about 1 or 2 years ago. But I think that the COVID pandemic will speed up those technologies in the passenger cabin. They will be introduced more actively, and they will stay with us for a long time. But it's not just a question of safety, it's also a question of convenience. For me, it's much more convenient to work in a contactless way. It's faster, it's more convenient, and given that this trend arises in many aspects of our life, I think that the main trend on the airplane will be for more contactless technologies. Thank you. Natalia?
Прогноз, да, я понимаю, что сейчас главный вопрос для Etihad это...
I understand right now that the most important question for Etihad is recovering flights from Russia to Abu Dhabi, and I believe that it will be resolved soon. So I'm going to ask you to say this on behalf of the entire Etihad, but maybe without any concrete forecast. So what difficulties are the largest airlines going to face? Those airlines that were in a great situation before the COVID. So how will those airways and airlines, how will they have to change their work? Well, as for big airlines, I think it's about the use of their current fleet. Will it be in demand? It's no secret that when the markets are growing rapidly, many airlines buy a lot of planes, and now they will not need those planes, so they will have to resolve this issue. And many airlines will not survive.
одна из компаний, которая, конечно же,
Fortunately,
очень хорошо
Etihad
поддерживается
is one of the
государством,
airlines
компанией.
that has a lot of
Вот.
support
Но
from the government.
не
We
все
are
авиакомпании
a
находятся в одинаковом
government-owned
положении. Я
company,
думаю, что
but not
произойдет
all companies
оптимизация
are in the
мощностей.
same
И,
situation.
наверное, да,
I
будет
think that
появляться
they
большое
will
количество
optimize their
low-cost перевозчиков,
capacity,
и даже
and we will probably have more low
авиакомпании со
costers
стандартным сервисом также будут для себя рассматривать эти
or
модели или какие-то
airlines
кооперации.
with a
В
standard
частности,
level of
Etihad
service.
уже стал
And there will
совладельцем
be
новой
more models
авиакомпании
for cooperation.
Air Arabia Abu
Etihad is
Dhabi,
a
Air
co-owner
Arabia, да.
of Air
которая уже
Arabia, the
выполняет
new
первые
airline,
полеты. Вот
which
первый
already
рейс
does the
был в
first
Александрию.
flights. The first flight was to
Не исключено, что
Alexandria,
в России будут новые города, которые,
and it
если
is possible
авиакомпания,
that there will
как
be
Etihad, как
new
full-service
cities in
airline,
Russia
не в состоянии выполнять там
serviced by Etihad.
в силу ряда причин, в том числе и
If
из-за
Etihad
затратной
is
части
unable to
каких-то
do those
не
flights for a
столичных
number
города
of
России,
reasons,
то такой авиакомпании,
and
как
I'm talking
Air Arabia Abu
about
Dhabi, будет под силу
cities other than
новой
Moscow,
бизнес-модели.
then Air Arabia Abu Dhabi will
Хорошо,
be able to do
спасибо,
this
Томс.
thanks to their
Если можно
business model.
нас
Thank you.
снова
Toms,
соединить. Томс, кстати, по поводу
the floor
работы
is
и
yours now.
успешности
Regarding
бизнес-модели
your
лоукостеров, я
operations
уже вот не первый
and
раз
the
из сегодняшнего эфира
success
это услышал.
of
В принципе, то, что вы описали, то, что
low-cost
происходит с
airlines
вашим
business
флотом,
model,
ваша модель,
it's not the
напрашивается
first time that I
аналогии
hear
с
about that. But
лоукост-сегментом.
when we
Так ли
look at
это? И
your
рассматриваете ли вы для
company's
себя вот
model,
такую нишу?
there is some similarity with the low-cost segment. So are you
Моя
considering this
компания,
niche for
наша модель
yourselves?
называется гибридная, да, мы до сих пор
Well,
имеем бизнес-класс
our airline has a hybrid model.
мы
We
стараемся
have the business
соединить
class
оба мира. Мы до
and
сих
the
пор
low-cost
находимся и
segment.
будем находиться
We are
в
trying
информационных
to put
системах, в агентских
both
системах.
worlds
И
together.
в то же самое время наш
We use
реальный
both traditional
продаж
systems and
находится
innovative
в
systems,
последние года 5,
and
наверное, или 3, скажем
over
так,
the last 5
подрастает.
years,
Мы
we
находимся
increased
на
our sales
обеих
by about
сторонах.
50%.
Насчет
So actually,
самолета,
we
ну,
try
нет ни
to
одного
service
лоукостера,
both
который летал
segments.
на
As
маленьком
for
самолете
airplanes,
продажи. Там все-таки
I
нужен
think
здесь
that
какой-то
those low
какой-то
costers that used
объем, чтобы это
small airplanes,
оплачивало это.
I think that
Так
there should be a
что
certain
наша
volume
модель
for that.
остается гибридная, как она была, так
So
она
our
и
model
остается.
will remain a hybrid one.
Мгм. С какими проблемами сталкиваются сейчас небольшие
That's
перевозчики
good.
в первую
And
очередь?
what
Что
problems are
для
you
вас наиболее
facing
критично?
in the first order? What is more critical for
У
you?
нас сейчас критично, конечно, карантин, то, что я говорил. Но
Well, of course, it's the
перевозчику,
quarantine that is critical for us. It's
скажем
a
так,
critical
этот,
problem.
который отдыхающий или leisure сегмент, но он есть, и он очень быстро может нарастить.
We have
Те,
leisure
которые
segment,
летели
and
по
it can
работе,
grow
по
very rapidly.
бизнесу, там, наверное, какое-то время пройдет, пока они вернутся.
But
Опять же,
it
есть
will
такой
take certain
сильный сегмент,
time.
как
But once
marine
again,
бизнес, как, например, ну,
we
эти,
have
которые
a strong
PFR,
segment.
родственники и друзья, но это остается. А для нас просто мы должны быть на этом
So
месте.
we still have
И
these
забрать этих
possibilities. We
насколько
just
это
need
возможно.
to remain at the same place, and we will try to do
Хорошо, спасибо
business
большое.
as usual.
Я завершаю наш
Okay,
сегодняшний эфир.
thank you
Спасибо
very
всем за
much. Now I'm
выступление. Было очень
concluding
информативно.
today's program.
Было, что
Thank you very
называется,
much for your
insightful.
presentations. It has been very
Спасибо.
informative and
Благодарю
insightful.
за внимание. И спасибо.
Thank you very much for your
До свидания.
attention.
Спасибо.
Thank
До
you.
свидания.
Goodbye. Goodbye.